All right, so I know that I went through the teachings this morning and wrote down a whole bunch of questions myself. I find it very useful to do that as I'm taking notes, just for review. And I don't know if anybody else did the same thing. So I can go through my questions, or you can throw your questions into the ring, or we can do a bit of both. Yes.
I have a question.
You have a question. And the other thing I thought we could go into groups, and we're a big group. We want to stay as one big group.
Yeah, because we get all the questions.
We get more questions in, of course. I was preempting that. Okay, Venerable Pekar.
Could you just go over the two types of bodhisattvas?
Oh, yeah.
Being of the less sharp faculties myself, I do get it.
Well, I actually thought that Geshe said it very kindly, because when we're studying, it's usually the dull faculty.
Yeah.
And I think I'm definitely on the dull variety. No, so sharp faculty, if you think about the sharp faculty that develop the wisdom first,
Okay.
and so they have the wisdom realizing emptiness and then generate the bodhicitta mind, which is when they enter the path of accumulation, Mahayana path of accumulation. So Geshe was also saying there's like 5 paths, and that's the first one. And there's 5 paths, Mahayana paths, there's 5 for hearers, 5 for solitary realizers. So if we're looking at the Mahayana presentation for a solitary hearer realizer, solitary realizer or hearer, it would be spontaneous or uncontrived renunciation would be the entrance to the path. So the sharp faculty bodhisattva focuses more on the wisdom first. Of course, we all have innate compassion. That's where Geshe was saying more head or more heart, which is actually probably more correct than saying a dull. We're just more heart. I mean, I'm just more heart.
I like the less head, more heart.
Less head, more heart. Less head, more heart. So then the less sharp bodhisattva would generate first uncontrived bodhicitta. But if you think about it, it sort of also relates to Geshe's hypothesizing about why was it that this conversation is between Sherab and Avalokiteshvara, representing the 2 sides of wisdom and method side and coming together. But you could also say for a sharp faculty bodhisattva, they have the wisdom realizing emptiness. So that's a very powerful, sharp, very powerful mind. So you're generating bodhicitta with on the basis of that very powerful mind. So you've already, it's not like, oh, now I'll put that aside and over here, or, you know, that you're imbued with that mind because you've had the direct perceptual realization of emptiness, and so you're using that mind. And the same way around, bodhicitta itself is a very powerful mind in which to then more quickly generate the wisdom realizing emptiness as well. So it's a win-win either way, let's say. Now, so.
Well, I suppose I was just trying to find hooks for myself in what Geshe was saying. And sometimes I think it images, or they come. And you talked about a puzzle, putting this with this puzzle, and I've been doing jigsaw puzzles lately.
And when you finish them, you manage to finish the whole picture.
Difficulty.
Because there's never a whole picture until it's finished, is it?
Well, that's
which is interesting, isn't it?
like, yeah. So like, if this self is, say, the jigsaw puzzle, and then you sort of, so we've made this, this self, we've created it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we just, you know, like we do at the end of the jigsaw puzzle.
Just deconstruct the whole thing.
Yeah, and so it's gone, you know. So there was that, and then I thought, so.
But then there's a danger there, isn't it? That then you say, it's gone, there's nothing, so nihilism. So we've thrown too much out, right? So
yeah.
So your question is what?
My question more was, okay, so I'm sitting here without my jigsaw puzzle. What on earth does that feel like?
What does it feel like to you being without a jigsaw puzzle?
What does it feel like to me?
We would say, oh, sorry, you say. Anyone
It's
else
more
can
like
say.
just trying to imagine yourself into that place that perhaps, I don't know, in a few lifetimes or so. It's just like trying to get some kind of, I mean, we've all got a sense of ourselves here, right, in our bodies now.
I hope so.
Yeah. Which may be not very true.
It is
right,
true
it's false,
conventionally.
you know. But what would it be like if you didn't have that? Like,
Yeah, so
it's not really a question that.
no, but that's where we don't want to go. Because that, I mean, it's a good hypothetical to put. Like if you go back to your jigsaw analogy and say you've done your jigsaw and then you take it all apart, what remains is an absence of jigsaw. It's not nothing because you had the jigsaw before. So that's the sort of sense it. But when we're saying an absence of self, we're not saying an absence of self. Conventionally, we all exist. So we have to say that an absence of self in the way I perceive it to exist. You know, when Geshe said at some point, you know, that when we do an analysis on say, selflessness of this person, right, what's the first point? We have to, or selfness of the self, the first point we have to identify is what's that self we're refuting. We call it the object of negation, the self that we're refuting. We have to identify what that self is. We're not wanting to refute that we exist. We're not wanting to chuck everything out. It's the one that appears to our mind, how our mind perceives us to exist. So we get that we have an image of ourselves.
Yeah.
We can have many images of ourselves, you know. I'm this, I'm that, I'm everything. And that image, we call it, it's called a few different things. Generic image, sound generality, it's called a few different things. It basically means as soon as we have an image, even of emptiness, it becomes permanent. Right? That image, it's an image in our mind is permanent, right? We're not permanent. The image in our mind is, so it's wrong. And so it's that perception of self to exist as it appears in that permanent or independent or self-sufficient, whichever ways we look at it. Right? So that's what we're having. That's the hardest point in this analysis. It's the hardest point to get. How do I perceive myself to be, to exist, right? Or this self, it's not just at a sort of conventional level. It's like this essence of me, this essential, like ongoing, forever me, right?
You mean that the false part?
The false, the one that doesn't exist as it
Yeah.
appears to exist.
Yeah.
It exists, but it doesn't exist in the way it appears. So it appears to what truly exists, inherently exists from its own side, by way of its own characteristics. And why we have all these different terms is because there's different schools of Buddhism that have posited some existence of something. There must be something there, some essential little bit of me. There must be something. We go down to like some schools, even like partless particles. I always think about that as well. You know, when they're looking for the God, is it the God particle? Is that the one that is the partless particle, which I didn't find?
I didn't find.
They didn't find. Surprise. To save themselves a lot of money. But we grasp at that concept of having that, because it must be something that can't just be all So how do things exist then? They do exist. I mean, we exist. Everything around us exists. So we have to have both sides of the coin. Don't we? We exist depending on causes and conditions and all the parts Geshe was talking about, you know, it's the head, so we interrogate the parts of the body, but we can also have the whole collection of the body. Is there something inherently existent there that I label this me, I, self? So we're looking at a subtle level of self, not at the conventional level. So something that well, we're born with that idea of a sense of self, aren't we? Anybody who's a parent can tell you that. Little baby has a strong sense of self, right? So we're born with that, but it's not, it's because we make it something fixed, we get ourselves into trouble. We grasp at that existing how we think it does. And if we let go of that, everything's possible. So liberation, that's liberation. Another jigsaw puzzle, or
No, that's,
what do you think the jigsaw?
enough already.
The jigsaw picture is dependent on all those parts, isn't it?
Yeah.
People feel free to give answers as well, not just ask questions. So, yeah.
People, can I just ask, I may have heard wrong, but hearing reference to emptiness or selflessness of person and phenomena, it sounded like the 5 aggregates fell under phenomena,
Correct.
which,
It's
yeah,
everything that is not a self of person is phenomena. So we label this me self on the basis of these aggregates, right?
so I thought 5 aggregates fell under person rather than phenomena.
They're the basis for labeling the person on, but the person is labeled onto the aggregates, isn't it? Like I don't say my aggregates are here, but my person, I am over here. Or maybe you do.
No, so,
Yeah.
well, yeah, so the 5 aggregates regarded as phenomena as
Yes, yeah,
as opposed to.
because they're like you've got form. That's a phenomenon. You know, all the sense consciousnesses are phenomena. So if we go through it one by one,
Yeah.
we see that they are phenomena. And then that becomes our interrogation. If this self exists, it must be somewhere there, either in form, feeling, discrimination, propositional factors, consciousness, and one of those or all together. You do that interrogation. Or if it's not there, then it must be something separate because I have my body, my this, my that. So maybe there's some other separate self that owns this. So we interrogate all of those.
So the schools that wouldn't look at selflessness of both person and phenomena, only of self,
Yeah.
there wouldn't be the examination of the 5 aggregates.
Not of the emptiness of the 5 aggregates. So that's like the first turning of the wheel that the Buddha taught. And that's where people say, oh, it's contradictory, or if you follow those schools, you say, oh, the Mahayana Sutras don't exist, and so forth. Some say that because Buddha taught according to the audience and moving people gradually along from one step to the next step to the next step.
So there wasn't that starting to examine the aggregates until second turning.
I wouldn't say not examining, you could examine in permanence, you could examine many things, but the sense of selflessness of phenomena. Yeah. So when we say it's not that they didn't interrogate, because you see there is some, they hold on to some, they might sort of subtle level of it, is it like the partless particle, or there has to be something permanent and independent, unitary, there has to be something self-sufficient. some substantial existence from its own side, whereas the middle way view says no. It says that it's the concept that's imputed on that that actually creates form, or any of that. I know it's very tie you in knots stuff, isn't it? Okay. Any other questions? Maybe it's that one. Okay, so, or any other answers?
Very tricky
that
is
haven't thought of before?
primary mind.
So just going through, Geshe, please stop at any chance. So Geshe went through well, actually, the first question that Geshe asked that I noted was, do we really think it's possible to overcome all the deluded states of mind, all the afflictions and so forth? Why is it so important that we answer that question in the affirmative?
Otherwise, we wouldn't bother.
Oh, yeah, it is, otherwise we wouldn't bother. Yeah, it's true. If we say that, and this is the thing, if we say, you know, when we have the presentation on the Four Truths, are true cessations possible? If they're not, why? But if they're not, I mean, you have to interrogate why not. And here we're sort of like all agree, right? Don't you think? If you don't, please, we love debates. But you're not going to, you won't have any understanding that this is all based on the foundation of our fundamental ignorance. What does that mean? How do all these afflictions come from some root ignorance?
So is this to do with the 12 links?
Well, you can look at it in terms of the 12 links that propels existence. But then you have to look at it in terms of what else propels existence is karma and that self-grasping mind. Grasping, clinging, grasping. So you can look at it. In the 12, this is, I don't really want to go into we want to go into the 12 links, we can. But all of that's in the Heart Sutra. Geshe hasn't got to that part yet. So that's what we could say is that what we're looking at here is conventional truth and ultimate truth. So the explicit is emptiness, and then the implicit is things like the Four Noble Truths and the process of disintegration, 12 links and so forth. So other teachings are in there. Anyway, Geshe hasn't gone into any of that. But we, without that conviction, I guess, that by uprooting the fundamental ignorance, we uproot all the afflictions. And we hear this, but do we really know it? Sounds good to me, but do we really know it?
You have to follow it back.
Yeah,
Find out where it started.
where it started. So
The innate view of the transitory collection.
yeah.
That's the ignorance.
That's the ignorance, the transitive collection being the 5 aggregates, holding those to be.
Excuse me, there's a question online. We'll see if we can get the person to talk. Would you like to speak now, please?
Shaky, how's it going?
Hi, who's that?
This is Sid.
Oh, hi, Sif.
Hey. Venerable Shaky, is the realization gained in the primary mind?
Is the what?
The realization gained in the primary mind?
Is the realization
So again, well, it depends on which primary mind you're talking about, obviously, because primary mind, sense consciousnesses can be primary minds. So when we say primary mind or main mind, it's the main consciousness that's functioning.
Yeah, is that where the realization comes
Well,
from?
it is a mental perceptual realization. So
Yeah.
it's a very subtle level of that mind, of mental consciousness.
Okay, and does it reside in there, that primary mental consciousness,
Does what reside there?
the realization?
I don't think we'd say we use that mind to have that realization. It's a non-conceptual mind.
Okay.
It's, yeah.
And once you get the realization, is it always with you? Like when you're about to die, is a realization there, and in your next rebirth, is realization there as well?
Wouldn't it be great? I mean, Phuntsog Rinpoche, when he was 12, was asked, because Geshe Lama Kontok, as the Lamas of Rinpoche indicated, had the realization of emptiness, had indicated that. And so the question came to Phuntsog Rinpoche, whatever you do, don't ask people if they've got a realization of emptiness. But anyway, he said, give me a break, I'm 12 years old. So, but Siv, you know, because we can have a conceptual, like I said, that's perceptual, we can have a conceptual realization of emptiness. We now have some conceptual, each and every one of us, working knowledge, however developed that is, of emptiness. We haven't, maybe because we're still here and because we were here in the first place, haven't dismissed that as a as a possibility, right? So we have some conceptual understanding, and then like but generally that's based on having some generic, it is based on having some generic image of emptiness. You know, we don't realize it when creating all these images all the time, and that's fine, it's a working basis. And then on the path of preparation, that generic image becomes weaker and weaker until on the path of seeing we have that first moment of direct perceptual realization of emptiness, right, which is a very refined mind. But what do you do then on the path of meditation? So that's like momentary, and then on the path of meditation, you've got to keep going over and over and over that. You've got to deepen that. So at any time, even now, conceptually, we can feel like we have this, you know, experience, a momentary experience of emptiness, and think, oh, that's it. Because as soon as you say that's it, you've lost it. But unless we keep going with our meditation, as Geshe said, we have to meditate again and again and again and again to really get to the point of going from conceptual to weakening that, and eventually having that perceptual realization. So it depends on where on that continuum you are, whether you're going to be able to access that in a future life.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Good to hear from
You too. Thank you so
you. Is
much.
that Bhagavad Institute?
And Geshe also talked about dwelling in that.
Dwelling in it.
Emptiness, didn't
Yeah.
he? So almost like soak yourself in it
Yeah,
for as long as you can.
exactly.
To sort of,
And to consolidate it,
yeah.
to deepen it. So in a lot of our practices, and we have that, like when you do Vajrasattva practice or so forth, then at the end it says, and whatever your understanding of emptiness, like of inherent existence, like all dependent, right? And you keep your mind there and hold it there for as long as you can to get a taste, if you like, of that. And then when that starts to fade, then you go on. So when you do this analysis on emptiness or selflessness of the person, the same thing. Anytime that you get some feel or sense of that, rather than sort of ticking all the analytical points, but something sinks in, then you hold your mind there. And then when that we can certainly go on with the analysis.
It's really interesting the teachings like that, isn't it? Like, yes, from what I've experienced, which is, oh, I don't believe that. And you hear things again, and you sort of take them home. You kind of work with them a little bit.
Mm.
But over time, it's almost like your whole mind has to adjust to, I suppose, a whole different conceptual.
It is a whole different way of seeing or unseen.
Yeah.
It is, because what, I mean, generally, until we met the Dharma and these teachings, we weren't going analysing how things exist, whether they exist. I mean, and the concept of do things exist in the way I perceive them to certainly wasn't in my mind until I met the Dharma. Maybe that's true for a lot of us. I wasn't thinking, maybe things aren't as they appear to me. Of course, you have all the philosophical debates. I remember my father going to university, as a mature age student, and we had endless discussions of why is a tomato red. Of course, at that stage, I didn't know there were so many different colours of tomato. And is a tomato red? So, philosophy has engaged in this discussion for some time. But whether we have these, you're introduced to new concepts and your life's never the same, true. But it's a freedom. Like, if we get it, it's a freedom. Because it is that thing of, what does emptiness, how does emptiness of inherent existence, of true existence, of permanent existence, of independent existence, existence by way of its own side, how do all of these create some sense of freedom? If we understand that, how does it create freedom for us?
What are the concepts?
Not like a concept, you're still got
You're not
concepts.
You don't
grasping,
get
not clinging
attached.
onto them.
You don't get
You're not-
attached.
You're not seeing them as, you're not seeing any of those things as the reason for you to be happy. You're not trying to hold on to them.
You're not trying to hold on to things. But it's like everything, if everything's dependent on causes and conditions, if everything's dependent on parts, everything's impermanent, everything's continuously changing, nothing's fixed. Do you stop freaking out about climate change? Probably not.
No.
Because you sort of want it to be fixed in the direction you want it to, but it is possible. Everything is possible. Everything is possible. So that's the freedom. So we don't have to, we have a choice. It gives you choice.
I'd really like that when Rinpoche's stressing in one retreat that from this moment on, you've got this incredibly huge choice. And with every single thing you do, you have the choice to go this way or that way.
Or some other way. Many
We're up there or
He's
down
talking
here.
about
Yeah,
the
10
positive
directions.
way or the not so positive way.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah,
Trying to
every
not-
moment we have that choice, but we don't recognise we have that choice because we habitually react to things. But as Geshe was saying, we can watch that in our mind and see that and not follow it. That's why I like when the Dalai Lama says, I observe anger arise in my mind and I observe it fade away 1 minute. So it's not saying I get angry, I cognitively fuse with anger. I am angry. It doesn't say any of those. It just says I observe it coming along and going because I've meditated since I was 6 years old. So it means that not getting caught up with that. So you have the freedom not to go there. I can see that anger coming, but I'm not going to get angry. It's great.
You can do it.
Huh?
If you can do it.
You can do it. We can all do it. But it takes a lot of effort currently because we've got eons of bad habits. Okay, so all right, so Geshe was outlining the Heart Sutra in terms of the first the first part, the first paragraph, and the common prologue that went over the four greatnesses, which is like when you have the presentation of the land rim, once on Papa's land rim, and you usually have these four greatnesses of the time of the teaching, the teacher, the Bhagawan, so the excellent time, excellent teacher, the excellent place of Master Vulture's mountain, Vulture's peak we call it, teeny tiny place, and the retinue, the community of monks, as it was, and the bodhisattvas, so that you had the certain number there, but mostly in the sky. So usually that's sort of given as a conviction that you can rely on this teaching that's just part of the format. And then as Geshe went through the uncommon prologue, where Avalokiteshvara is also looking at the emptiness of phenomena, emptiness of five aggregates. And also is because the lower schools that don't posit emptiness of phenomena. So this is saying this is uniquely Mahayana presentation. Yeah, and then we have the question and answer between Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara, and we haven't got to the bit that we all want to discuss forever from emptiness. That's all the preliminaries, and then we get to when we get through, anyway, Geshe may well present how each of the parts are presented in each of those sections coming up, which hasn't touched on yet. So what else? All right, so maybe what did you understand about how we've got to proceed with meditation, or how does meditating on these selflessness of person, how does that happen? How do we get this understanding of emptiness?
Going through systematically.
Huh?
Going through systematically.
Going through systematically, yeah, because Geshe said study itself, because we usually say the wisdom of hearing and study, wisdom of recollection, discussion like this, and the wisdom of meditation, as if they're three separate things. But as Geshe said, no, your meditation can be as you're studying, because it's reflection. You're using the analysis, the points of analysis.
Doesn't that only give you a conceptual understanding, though, without sitting in meditation and contemplating?
Correct, yeah. So, but it gives you the points of what to meditate on.
Yeah.
So we have to clarify what are those points to meditate on, and then take that into a meditation. And as Geshe said, stay with each of those points for as long as we can find different perspectives, different understandings. Yeah.
So the beginning, Geshe was talking about grasping to self,
Yeah.
and grasping to what is mine.
Yes.
Are the two main?
Yeah. So first is the grasping at self, so that we say we have innate self-grasping, like it just comes along. And then because we have this sense of self, so we have this image of self, and then what is going to support this self? So then that becomes a self-cherishing mind of grasping at mine, me and mine. So that comes along the basis of grasping at a self. My body, all the parts of the body, my family, my friends, my enemies. Well, I'm not grasping at those, I'm pushing them away. So all of that is on the basis of me and mine.
Grasping to a certain type of experience.
Yes, yeah. We grasp it endless pleasurable existence. As Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, I hate to disappoint you. Well, you didn't say that, I'm saying that. But Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, we have tasted everything there is to taste in samsara. There's no new taste to be had. I think the world's trying to do a good job of that. Ridiculous. But so that hooks us back in. So that's because of that self-cherishing and the craving for what's going to give me pleasure, or my feel-good friends, make me feel good, etc., etc. So in other words, the attachment and the aversion for the opposite come along on that basis of the ignorance grasping at a self in the first place. Is that where you're going?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so any other comments, questions, Andrew?
It's very basic, but at the start of today, you were chanting the Sutra.
Yeah.
What are the instructions for doing that?
The instructions. I'm not
Seems
sure.
like there's a certain rhythm or tone.
Oh, so I was doing my best to follow the tune of Yangtze Rinpoche. So really it's a lilt, right?
Mm-hmm.
So actually, it was very interesting yesterday in the car with Geshe. We were having a discussion about chanting, and Geshe was saying, I think we need to update, 21st century chants. And I guess that's what Yangtze Rinpoche did. It's still like a lot of the Tibetan ones, which is like a lilt, gives some lilt to it. But the thing is, if we start to chant, we actually bring it some more energy than if we're just reciting, and as long as I've said, we just go blah, 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 and nothing goes in. So, and then Geshe was talking last night about doing it slowly. So this was a little bit slower. It wasn't like meditation slow. But that's a way to do it in meditation, where you just, maybe stick with one phrase and then you meditate on that and go on to the next. There's a Lama Zopa Rinpoche has written advice for retreat on the Heart Sutra, and he presents these that as a way of meditating. You stop at a certain point and meditate on that, and then go on, or go on in the next session. So just see the impact that chanting has on the mind versus simply reciting. Of course, simply reciting has a great power on our mind no matter what, because reciting a sutra on emptiness, and as Geshe was saying last night, how much power that has. So even we don't know the power, we can feel that I feel I'm more engaged when I'm chanting. I don't know if other people have that experience. Okay. Well, shall we take a break so that she'll be back in 15 minutes? Is that correct? I'm not sure if this clock is on time. About that.
Thank you.
Guess you can mute it.
Oh, on the Zoom, and also the 1 hour time. Do you want to put it as a message? Yeah. Or just a quick thing. I noticed that there's passenger rights. What is it worth mentioning?
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
I'm obviously sitting there.
Okay, yeah, I'll put it back on. Yeah, thanks. So just quickly before Geshe, so there's a car parked outside with a number plate, with the number on their number plate is 1DYB 385. It's got its passenger light on, so the battery might drain. So thanks, Patrick. Yep.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Patrick.
So copy the Zoom link.
Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. session. Only the 10 a.m. session will be tomorrow morning's 10 a.m. session.
Okay.
Will be at this Zoom link.
In the afternoon.
In the afternoon, as per this one.
Okay.
Great. GT. Still yes, it's true.
We've still got a bit of time. Another announcement to make is tomorrow morning's 10 a.m. session. If you're here in person, it doesn't not concern you, but if you're going to join over Zoom, it'll be via the regular Sunday meditation Zoom link rather than this one. So, yeah, Venerable Cherokee will be leading a meditation on the Heart Sutra at 10 a.m. tomorrow. If you're joining via Zoom, it's not at this Zoom event. Okay, so if that confuses you, if you're going to join via Zoom, come and see me before you go.
So daylight saving for Eastern States.
Eastern States.
Yeah.
Doesn't.
No, Eastern States.
only the fifth. So, good afternoon, and I hope you had a nice discussions. Sometimes you learn more from the discussions. Guys, that is what our teachers always used to say, and even in monastery, and that's true. You know, you learn much more from your classmates through a lot of discussions. Yeah. So this morning, I think we're just up to where our Lokishora gave the answer to Shariputra's questions. How correctly repeat the whole those five aggregates as also empty of inherent nature. And so we were discussing on what the all also includes. And so we talk about the persons, you know, the emptiness of the persons, or that self of the person is empty of inherent nature, not only the self, also the five aggregates. So in order to have complete correct realization of selflessness of persons, that can become an antidote to all the delusions, then one also need to have an understanding of the emptiness of the aggregates. Nagarjuna explained in his, I think it's Precious Garden, even though I'm not 100% sure, but if I think it is the Precious Garden. 지시 풍부 중에 뭐 대신 대단 나중에 되는데 So it says, as long as there is a grasping to the aggregates due to not realizing the emptiness of aggregate, therefore there's a grasping to the aggregate. As long as there is the grasping to the aggregates, then there will be grasping. And as long as there's a grasping, then delusion will arise and one will create the karma. And through arising of delusion and creation of karma, then one will again continue to circle in the samsara and experience the sufferings. So, you know, so not only we need to have realization of emptiness of the self of the person, but also realization of emptiness of the aggregate, the phenomena. So here we talk about five aggregates. You know, why five aggregates? You know, what is the importance of five aggregates? Even though there are so many countless phenomena, you know, why here talk about the five aggregates, give a lot of emphasis on that five aggregates. Because if we see where the sense of I or me or self arises, it arises in relation to the aggregates. When we see, you know, your body or someone's body, then you see, oh, I saw me, I saw that person. I saw John by seeing, because we see the John's physical aggregate, then we tend to relate that aggregate with that person. Because you see your body's reflections in the mirror, then you say, oh, I can see reflection of me in the mirror. Sometimes you have, feeling of the same way, when someone punch your body, then you say, someone punched me. So we relate so-called me or I self in relation to our aggregate. That's one way how we relate with our physical aggregate. Sometimes, you have sad feeling. You feel, I'm feeling sad. I'm sad today. You relate with that feeling of sadness as you. I'm sad today. I'm happy today. Depending on your different feelings in that moment. And so same with, depending on your state of minds, when your mind is making progress, then we relate with ourselves, I'm making progress. When your mind is making progress in your practice and path, your mind gets better and better through practice. And then you say, I'm making progress. We relate with your mind, as self, as me, Same thing when your mind, of the compassion mind arises. I feel compassionate. When anger arises, I'm angry today. I'm upset today. One of the mental factors, whether it's anger, whether it's loving kindness, when it manifests or arises, then again we tend to relate with that and say, I'm angry today. I'm compassionate today, like that. So those are part of it, convolutional factors, that's the other mental factors, And your discriminating mind, when we make the discriminating mind with distinguishing correctly, incorrectly, whatever, then again, it is your mind, distinguishing mind, whether that is able to make correct, incorrect, distinguish, but then I screw up, or I made right, I screw up, even though it is your mind. So that is true that we can see how we relate ourself, so-called the self, I or me, in relation to the aggregates. In relation to the aggregates. So that is where there's very strong connections between those two objects or two phenomena. Also, one is, some of the earlier schools of thoughts before Buddha came, there are a lot of school of thoughts already that have been established much more earlier, even the Buddhism. And so earlier there is a concept of permanent self, so-called soul or permanent self, permanent, partless, self-sufficient kind of self that continue from life after life, And the reason why they have that is because the aggregates, when we die, whether you cremate your body, it doesn't continue. A lot of our gross feeling, mental factors, consciousness, they cease at the time of death. So therefore, those can't be the self, because there is someone self that continue to take rebirth, and therefore that has to be permanent. So therefore they come with these ideas of permanent self, and Buddha rejected that such existence was such permanent self, and then presented, yeah. So that is also how it comes in the five aggregates comes play important also from that point of view. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we can come later, but so all the Buddhist school of thoughts, they all reject the idea of permanent self. All this Buddhist school of thought reject the idea of permanent self. They all agree there is self that's impermanent, but there is no self. So this first maybe that let's put that way. So they all reject permanent self. So then, if there is no permanent self, then what goes on to take rebirth, continuous life after life, and to someone that achieve enlightenment, liberation, or someone who continue to take rebirth in samsara, continue to experience sufferings. So then there are different school of thoughts come with different ideas, what continues, and the so-called the self that continue, and among some of the school of Buddhist school of thought, they come to the continuity of the aggregate is the one, is the one, is the self. When you try to find, that is the self that continue, take rebirth. Then some other school of thoughts, not that one, but the mental consciousness. This is the sense consciousness cease, when we die, because in order for the sense consciousness to function, you need the sense organs, sense faculties. And when we die and when we cremate, buried, whatever, the sense organs, faculties are damaged. So when there's no more sense faculties, the sense consciousness cannot function with the object. So there's no more of sense consciousness. That also ceases. But the mental consciousness continue. So then they say that is the one that continue, take rebirth, and the so-called the self. Then mind all these schools, even reject that one and say, even the sixth mental consciousness is still growth. It also ceases, and therefore, there should be something else. So therefore, there come this idea of, mind basis of all, alaya. They talk about eight consciousness, and this, alaya or the mind basis of all is the one that continues, and the self. Mind only school, the Nagarjuna school, reject even that idea, and when you try to find where is the self that continue to take life after life, you cannot find in any of those consciousness, any of them. Neither you can find in, as this morning we discussed, neither in sense consciousness, neither in mental consciousness, nor in continuity of that, nor, they don't have the concept of eight consciousness. They only have six, but even the alaya consciousness also. So anyway, because when you do that kind of same analysis you do, then again, they cannot withstand that analysis. Cannot be found. And for many of the other school of the thoughts, they feel like you have to find in somewhere. If you cannot find, how can you proceed, establish it as an existence? For them that is, and that's sometimes how we feel same way. If you cannot find, when you try to find the objects in something, if you cannot find in something, how can you say it exists? And so therefore, they feel that way, so therefore, when they try to analyze, and then that is how, when they feel like they're finding that. But when Nagarjunas, you cannot find, even when you analyze this. If you cannot find, then how can you establish something as existence? And that is the difficult point. That is where many of the school of thought have a difficulties. For them, if it cannot be found, they cannot establish it's something existence. But for Nagarjuna, even when you try to find within the object, even if you cannot find it, still it can be established as existence. So how can you establish something existence, you know, if it cannot be found when you do that kind of analysis, with that ultimate analysis within the objects, you know. Then, you know, Nagarjuna said it can be established as existence on the basis of the collections of the parts or the basis coming together and merely level, through merely imputed, designated. So in minor holy school, they say everything is merely level, merely imputed, merely designated. That is how things exist. Why? Because when you analyze and you try to find within the objects the way we did, it cannot be found. At the same time, we cannot say nothing exists because as a self we experience suffering. As a self we experience happiness, you know. As a self we continue to experience samsara. We can get out of that samsara, you know. We can create happiness for ourselves. We can create suffering for ourselves. We can create happiness to others. We can create suffering to others. So that is fact, that's reality, that is a direct experience. We cannot deny that. So therefore, there is someone who experienced that. There is someone who experienced that. That experience is a really experience, direct experience. There is someone who experienced, there is someone who that. And so therefore there must be self, but still you cannot find. And therefore there is self that is merely imputed on the basis of those aggregate coming together. On the basis of aggregate coming together, of your aggregate coming together, then you know, the mind impute level as the self on that. That is how the self exists, you know. So what continue life after life, taking rebirth, carrying the old karmic imprint, and experiencing the result of the previous karma is that merely imputed self. Is that merely imputed self is that continues. Is the merely imputed self that is the one who carry karmic seed. Is the merely imputed self that experience the suffering of previous karma and that create new karmic cause and condition for the futures. So there, apart from that merely imputed self, there's no self existing from its own side objectively. Are we clear? So now one of the cautions come to our mind is, you know, when we talk about everything being merely imputed, you know, if everything is merely imputed, what is the difference between the cup in my image and this cup? Do you get it? Both of them. One is cup that I'm holding and using to drink, and one is cup in my mental image. You know, they both are merely imputed. So does that mean they have no difference? You know, the cup is just in my mental imaginations or in my concept, and the cup that I'm holding on, you know, does that mean there is no external object, you know? So, you know, mind all the schools will say there is no external object, you know? Everything, even the cup that I'm experiencing, is due to my karmic imprint manifesting in that way, that I am able to relate and that I'm able to touch, that I'm able to use it, but there is no really external from its own side. Nagarjuna doesn't say there is no external phenomena. He believed that, you know, there is internal phenomena and there is external phenomena. So the difference between the cup in my mental image and the cup, this one, is different. This is external cup. Okay, this is external cup that I can touch with my hand, that I can pick up with my hand, that I can use to pour water or tea and use to drink. The cup in my mental image does not have that functioning. Do you get it? The cup in my mental image cannot be held by my hand, cannot be picked by my hand, cannot pour water inside, and it doesn't has the functioning or the ability to hold the cup. So therefore, even the both of them merely imputed, there is a difference. You know. So when we say merely imputed, sometimes we think, you know, that's all in your mind, that there's nothing external. Do you get it? Sometimes that because of the term merely imputed by mind, thought, concept, merely imputed, merely designated, merely labeled. When you use that term, when you think of those terms, then it feels like everything's in mind. Do you get it? Do you feel that way when you use those terms? That there's nothing external object there, you know? That is, again, misunderstanding. Okay? Nagarjuna doesn't reject the external object here. It doesn't reject that there is external cup that your hand can pick up, hold on, pour water, and use that. But the so-called cup is merely imputed. You know, there's some external objects, you know, the base, the hands, and I don't know what you call the body, that is made out of different materials, raw materials, and on the coming together of all these different parts, you know, it has certain functionings, you know, to hold water, for example. But the so-called, that is the basis to call it a cup, but the cup is just a merely label. Cup is merely label. If you try to find within that object, the basis is the handle of the cup, is the bottom of the cup, is the foresight of the cup. Each of those atoms, you cannot find cup within that. You know, you cannot find cup within that. So all different parts coming together, food in certain way, created in certain way, it has certain functioning on the basis of that, then cup is merely giving a level, merely imputed. And same with the self, as we said, you know. coming together of the aggregates, on the basis of collections of the aggregates, then we label it as a self, I or me. But to which we label is not self. Do you get it? To which you label is not a self. The aggregates are not the self. But it is on the basis of that aggregate you label self. Each part of this cup is not cup, but on the basis of those parts coming together in certain function, you label cup. And we need that to function in our conventional world. Those labels. Otherwise, if I ask or someone asked me to bring the cup, you wouldn't know what I'm talking about or what you are talking about, So, yeah, I guess I jump into the cup because but we're talking about aggregates. So we're talking about the connection between the aggregate and the self, and why those 5 aggregates are given a much importance, and how that is related with this selflessness of persons and phenomena. So that is where. So in order to have better understanding of, how the self is not aggregates, or that self cannot be found within or outside of aggregates, first we have to have a little bit more understanding of what those aggregates are. And again, in Abhidharma, there's very extensive studies of the 5 aggregates, in Abhidharmas, there's very extensive studies on the form. What is the form? What is the matter? Very details from gross matter to most subtle matters. Many subtle matters, atoms. So there is a lot of definition of the physical matters or the form, and what kind of form, and all subdivision, division, all kind of things. And then when it comes to the other aggregates, the 4 aggregates, which are part of mind and mental factors, then it talk about mind and mental factors, mind and 51 mental factors, and then it go in very detail with that. There's then very, very detailed explanations with the mind and mental factors. Okay. So in terms of those 4 other aggregates, aggregate of feeling, aggregate of what here, I think, discrimination mind, okay, or distinguishing mind, discrimination mind, and compositional factors, and the consciousness. So they all are part of the mind, okay? They're all a part of mind. In general, Buddhist study of the mind, one way of understanding the mind, there are many different ways of categorizing in different ways, the mind. One way of categorizing is mind and mental factors, And when we talk of mind and mental factors, when we talk mind and mental factor in that perspective, the mind is referring to more primary consciousness, and the mental factors are more specific kind of mental state of mind. And so in generally, just to give a very, very simple, basic understanding, the consciousness, the primary mind is like if you are trying to draw, it's the canvas of what you are going to paint or draw. And then when you draw, there are many different shape, colors, and that is the functioning of different mental factors. The primary mind has general kind of, awareness of the functioning of that is general awareness of the objects, like the compass. And then mental factors are more specific with the, so within that painting, then you have different colors and different whatever you draw, paint, and that is the function of different mental factors, that they each have their unique, different functionings of that. And so that is generally just general, that's mental factors. Within the mental factors, there are virtuous mental factors, non-virtuous mental factors, and then neutral mental factors, that is neither virtuous, neither non-virtuous, and so so when we talk about 5 aggregates, the consciousness, which is the 5th aggregate, is the primary consciousness, okay? And within the primary consciousness, there are 6 kinds of primary consciousness. Sense, eye sense consciousness, ear sense consciousness, nose sense consciousness, tongue sense consciousness, bodily sense consciousness, and mental consciousness. Those 6. And then within the mental factors, there are 51 mental factors. The number can kind of sometimes change according to slightly different according to some of the earliest Indian writing, in some, the most common one is 51 mental factor, but in some others you find the number slightly different as well. But most time, that is what one follow mostly. So anyway, so those, and within those 51 mental factors, feeling and discriminating mind are 2 specific mental factors from the 51 mental factors. And then when we say conventional here, compositional factors, that refer to the rest of 49 mental factors. Do you get it? Feeling mental factor, discriminating mental factors, and 49 mental factors from the 51 mental factors. Are we clear? There's 51 mental factors. Among that, there are 2 specific mental factors, feeling and discriminating, okay? How much left? 49. Those 49 is included in compositional factors. That's what we call here in aggregates. The 4th aggregate one. That is what here. Okay. What is compositional factors here? Again, according to different commentary, you might find slightly different, sometimes in certain commentaries, it can be also referred to the karma, the second link, which is compositional factors, this particular mental state, samba, but generally it's those 49 mental factors. The importance of those 2 mental factors, feeling and discriminating, why that is kind of specifically pick up from all the mental factors. Why is giving more emphasis on that by including 5 aggregate, specifically those 2 aggregate. Even though there's 51 mental factors, why specifically included those 2 mental factors out of aggregates and not others, what do you call, specifically, others are not included specifically. They have all kind of included in that generalizing included one of those aggregates. And in some it is explained, those 2 mental factors, they're very in terms of leading the self or the persons into the samsara, cycling into the samsara, they play important roles. That is why to understand that. How does that? Whenever we come in contact with the object, whatever object that might be, external, internal object, okay? When you come in objects, your mind distinguish. This is nice objects. This is bad objects. This is beautiful, attractive objects. This is very unpleasant, unattractive, ugly objects. That is what we do. We distinguish or we discriminate in that way, isn't it? This is something useful. This is something unuseful. This can be useful. This can be unuseful. This can give me happiness. This can give me sufferance. All kind of, our mind kind of distinguish and discriminate that way. On the basis of that kind of discriminations and distinguishing, then different feeling arises. Different feeling arises. When you distinguish or discriminate is as a attractive, beautiful, beneficial, helpful, happiness, cause of happiness, then we have pleasant feelings towards that. Pleasant feeling in coming with objects, such objects. When coming object, contact with that objects that our mind has discriminated positively in that way, then it gives you a pleasant feeling when you encounter or when you connect with that object. On other hand, when our mind discriminate or distinguishing negatively, when we come in objects of that objects, when we come in contact with that object, then there's unpleasant feeling. Unpleasant feelings. So what kind of feeling whether we are going to have pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling when we come into contact with any object, it very much depends on how you distinguish, your mind distinguish and discriminate that object. And due to arising of those 2 different feelings, pleasant and unpleasant feeling, then different delusions arises. When you have pleasant feeling, there's attachment to it. When you have unpleasant feeling, there's aversion to it. Through, and through and through attachment, aversions, then as we mentioned yesterday, this morning, then different others, disturbing negative emotions arises, and then, it completely destroy your inner peace, happiness, joy, and create more negative karma, and so forth. So that is why, so that is then you create negative karma or contaminate karma, and then you continue to take the burden samsara, and you continue to experience some suffering again and again and again endlessly. So among the mental factors, those two mental factors, play a big role. And so on the basis of that, those two are giving a more specific kind of role as part of within the 5 aggregates. So anyway, so in terms of aggregate, the aggregate form refer to mainly for our physical form, physical body, as well as all the physical matters, from gross to more subtle physical matters, all the physical matters, but mainly here referring to our physical body that is directly kind of connected with the feeling of the self, related with that, that, but also as well as all the physical world or physical matters of all the shade, colors, with all sizes, From the biggest universe to the most subtle particles or matters, And then in terms of the feeling, is one of those mental factors, from the 51 mental factors, that experience, either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. There is feeling of that. So, feeling can be, of course, there are many different ways of, again, dividing, but normally most time is, it can be a pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling or neutral feelings. Even in terms of the 12 link, same thing, contact and then feeling and then craving and grasping. When you talk about 12 link, at the very beginning there is the ignorance, then compositional factors or the creating of the karma due to the ignorance, and then consciousness, the imprint is left in that consciousness in that moment when you engage in the karma, and then, name and the form, and after name and the form, there's the sense faculties, development of sense faculties. Through the development of sense faculty, then you come in contact with the objects. Having come in contact with the objects, then you have the feelings. And due to the feelings, a pleasant feeling, then you have the craving. And that craving is getting bigger and bigger, stronger and stronger, grasping. And the karmic seed that has been activated by craving and grasping, then become existence to produce the result in next moment, ready to produce the result. And then, next is the sixth, the birth, aging, and death. So that is how 12 link. And again, you can see that also in that 12 link, how feeling lead to the craving that happened, that we spoke about. So that is our feeling. And discriminating mind is, again, specific mental factors that distinguish different objects. You know, this is yellow, this is flower, you know, this is rose, you know, this is glass, this is water, you know, this is the mind that discriminate or distinguish different objects from another objects. You know, one object with different object. That's function of the discriminating mind. The function of the discriminating mind is to be able to distinguish different objects from different one object from different objects. You know. And then convolutional factors, then I already said, you know, that is the other mental factors. And then we also talk about the consciousness. That is the primary consciousness. And sixth type primary consciousness. So that is, without going so much detail, but a little bit about what five aggregates are. You know, just to have a little bit understanding of what five aggregates are, because here, you know, there's a lot of mention of aggregates, those five aggregates in this Sutra, you know. And why we need to understand the emptiness of five aggregates is, if you don't understand the emptiness of five aggregates, then again you will have a grasping to the five aggregates. You know. So in order to release the grasping to form aggregate, you need to have a realization of emptiness of form aggregate. In order to release the grasping to feeling aggregate, then you need to have realization of emptiness of feeling, emptiness of feelings. In order to let go of grasping to the distinguishing or discriminating mind, you need to have realization of, you know, emptiness of that. You know, in order to not to have grasping to the conventional factors, you know, then you need to have a realization of that. In order not to have any grasping to the consciousness, then also you need to have a realization of emptiness of that. Therefore, one needs to have a realization of emptiness of five aggregates. Therefore, one needs to meditate on emptiness of five aggregates as well. And therefore, that is why it's presented. Okay? Because, you know, as we did the exercise this morning about the self-finding in the aggregates, within the aggregate, outside aggregate, and through that exercise, meditation, analysis, you comes, you know, you cannot find the self that you felt very strongly before, sense of so real, concrete, and solid, existing from its own side objectively, and you cannot find within the object itself, within the object itself, you know. So then you come to non-existing of such self. Non-existent such self, such here means the way it appears to our mind, where we perceive that is existing its own side itself, from its own objectively. You know, while it does not exist that way, but as I mentioned, still there is the self. So then how the self exists? It self exists by merely by the collections, coming together of 5 aggregates, collection of 5 aggregates, then the mind merely imputing, labeling on the basis of those 5 aggregates, on the basis of that. So that is how self exists, merely on that imputation level, merely on impute, the self is merely imputed, merely designated, merely labeled. Merely labeled to what? Merely labeled to those aggregates. Merely labeled to those aggregates. Merely labeled a common collection of aggregates. Then it's merely labeled, merely imputed. So since it's merely imputed, merely, then there is no solid self, concrete, and existing from its own side as it appeared to us. So, so while we understand that, okay, the self is merely imputed on the aggregates, but then what about aggregate themselves, to which the self is merely imputed? Self is not inherently or truly existing or exists from its own side because it is merely imputed on the aggregates. But maybe the aggregate themselves exist from their own side. And the moment you perceive the aggregate to exist from its own side objectively, then you will have grasping to them. You will have grasping to them. You get it? The moment you perceive the aggregate, whether it's form aggregate, feeling aggregate, discriminating aggregate, compositional factor aggregate, consciousness, whatever aggregate, the moment you perceive them to exist from its own side objectively, then you cling and grasp on them, because you see there's object from its own side, objectively there. And as long as that grasping and clinging, then that lead to problems. Then because of that grasping and clinging, then our mind, on the basis of that, then our mind project that object to good, bad, all kind of things. And on the basis of projecting differently, then attachment, anger, or aversion arises. And then that becomes the cause of problems and create the problems and suffers. So therefore, that is why one need to meditate on emptiness of not only the emptiness of the persons, but also the emptiness of the 5 aggregates. That those 5 aggregates are also empty of inherent nature, empty of existence on its own side or by itself. Okay, so that is where. So that is kind of explaining or showing, more kind of in a summarized way, in a contents way. And then next one, then again it goes more details, then now it goes more details on each of those aggregates and other phenomena. So then going more details, is those four, kind of profoundness of the emptiness. So form is empty. Just like the self. Okay. If we look at our own body, our form body, or someone's form body, how does that appear to our mind? Again, there is sense of your body or someone's body existing from its own side objectively. Absolutely, there is the body that exists from its own side objectively. Not only there's appearance that we perceive to exist that way, the way it appears. But if we analyze this, if the body exists the way it appears to our mind, the way our mind perceives to exist from its own side objectively, then again, when we analyze with the ultimate analysis, we should be able to find within the object if it's true, if the way it appears and the way we perceive is true, not mistaken, then it has to exist the way it appears, the way it perceived, that is existing from its own side objectively. If it exists from its own side objectively, then you have to find within the objects. And the object here, body, you have to find within those different part of your bodies, the limbs, organs, and whatever those part of each of those parts, or outside of that, within that or outside of that. And if we try to analyze that, try to find, is to your head the body? Can you find the body within your head? Is your shoulder, your hands, the body? Is your chest or upper part of your body the body? Is your thigh, legs, feet, each of those limbs, are they the body? Can you find the body within each of them? Or each of those organs within our body? And you can go, none of them is the body itself. These are part of the body, not the body itself. Do you get it? All of these, each of those parts, limbs and sub-limbs, I don't know whether there's a word sub-limbs. I made up. Part of the limbs, okay. The limbs and part of the limbs, okay, are they the body? They are not body, they are part of the body, they are part of the limbs. It is not the body itself. Can you find the body outside of those limbs and the part of the limb? You cannot find the body, your body, outside of your limbs and part of those limbs, where you cannot find where you find your body that has function of that body outside. So you cannot find either within its parts, the limbs and the part of the limbs, neither outside. And therefore therefore the form body can't exist from its own side objectively, because it cannot be found within the objects or outside the objects. therefore is empty of even the body, the form body is also empty of existing from its own side, existing inherently. But of course, you know, there's a body, you know, that can get smaller, bigger, more skinny, more fatter, you know, more healthy, more unhealthy. That is again, we cannot kind of reject that experience. That is again our direct experience. And there is this body that experiences that. So how does the body experience? How does the body exist? The body is on the basis of coming together of all these parts, the limbs and its part coming together, collection of that, then merely labeled, imputed as a body on that basis. And that's how it exists, merely on that, only on merely imputed level, merely designated. And sometimes, you know, Lama Zopa Rinpoche use terms, kind of interesting, you know, which use, it exists but do not exist. It do not exist but exist, you know. It exists, but the way it exists is so subtle, you know, only on merely imputation level, merely on designated level. It feels like it do not exist. It do not exist, but it exists, you know. When you analyze that way, you cannot find within the object. Therefore, feel like it does not exist, but at the same time, it exists. The fine line of existent, non-existent in this, that's the way. Once through understanding the physical form is known inherent in existence, or it does not exist from its own side, it only exists, you know, by only on merely imputed level, designated level, you know, then grasping to that physical form become weaker, you know, less grasping, you know, diminish the grasping slowly, you know, and completely, you know. But then again, the body is merely labeled. It does not exist from its own side because it's only merely imputed on the basis of the limbs coming together. What about the limb themselves, the part themselves? If the limbs, the part themselves exist inherently, truly, from its own side, again there's grasping to that. And again, if you do same analysis with the limb, same analysis again you can find. what is the head? Is the hair the head? Is the eye the head? Is the nose the head? Is the mouth the head? Is the scalp the head? Is the muscle in the head, in the face, the head? The vein, and all of that you do that analysis. Each of those parts are not the head. You cannot find within each part that makes it. Neither you find outside of the head, outside of those parts. And when you analyze again, the head is merely imputed. The head, one of the limb, head is merely imputed on the basis of coming together of those parts, such as the skull, the bones of the face, the nerve, the muscles, the eyes, nose, all of that. So on the basis of that, then it's merely imputed. What about the part that makes head? Even the nose. Again, even nose is merely imputed. If you try to find where is the nose, is the bone the nose? Is the skin of the nose? Is the nerve the nose? Is the muscle of that? And you break into its parts, and again, it's merely imputed on the basis of those parts coming together. Nose is merely imputed. And you can go down smallest, the most smallest particles. Even the most smallest particles is also, not part, it still has parts. It might be so small that you cannot divide it into two pieces anymore, but still it has its different parts, of the directional parts. And so therefore, again, if you analyze whether this part is that particle, again, each of those parts is not. And so even that most subtle part, atom or particles, whatever that is merely labeled as that particle on the basis of those parts coming together. So as you go that, then in terms of physical matter, in terms of physical form, there's nothing that exists from its own side by itself, whereto you can cling on, grasp on. And when there is no more object to hold on, cling on, then there is no clinging and grasping. If there's no objects for my hand to cling on, grasp on something, I cannot cling and grasp on something, my hand. In order to cling and grasp by your mind, the mind needs to have the objects, to find objects. And then, the object of clinging and grasping is that there is an object that exists from its own side by itself, objectively. That's why we cling and grasping. When I see the cup, I don't see the cup. It's merely imputed by the mind. I see the cup existing as a cup from its own side. That's why I'm clinging and grasping to that. Because you perceive that cup to exist by itself from its own side as a cup. But actually, if we really analyze deeply, cup is merely imputed, merely labeled as a cup on the basis of coming together of certain parts, conditions, and have certain functions. And that is what we call cup. So cup actually is merely imputed. and then the same, and then if cup is merely imputed, then we might think of the basis for the cup to which imputed might be exist from its own side. Even that one do not exist from its own side. Even that one is imputed on the certain parts basis. And maybe we might think that is something that exists from its own. Even that one, just like we do with the body, you go, from the body to the limbs, from the limbs to the part that make limbs, and the part of that part, the part of the part, so to the most tiny where there's nothing left, nothing physical object left that exists from its own side. There's no ultimate object to be found. Even though I think maybe some scientists are trying to find it, the God particle, the ultimate particles. So in Buddhism, there's nothing that's such, whether in physical matter, energy, or non-physical consciousness level, energy, there's nothing that can exist ultimately by itself from its own side by itself, or from its own side object. So just as the body is same with the car, car is merely level. You put certain wheels, certain engines together, and it has certain functionings, and then someone label as a car. That is it. Car is just merely label. If the car exists as a car from its own side, before someone who invented the car and decided to call it car, okay? When someone sees it, they wouldn't relate as a car. They wouldn't experience as a car. They wouldn't relate it as a car. If someone said, "Did you see the car?" You wouldn't know what they're talking about. So it is a term or label given to something which is not. Do you get it? Its part is not car, but on the basis of its part which are not car coming together, you label it as a car. And why we give label to the functioning, to differentiate one object from another object. If we don't give that label and if we don't function, then we'll all get crazy. When someone asks, "Can you give me a tea?" Someone started bringing something else, someone started there. What is happening, So therefore, just to give that idea, the car is merely label imputation given to something which is not. So therefore, car do not exist from its own side as a car. The cup do not exist as a cup from its own side. The table does not exist as a table from its own side. The flower do not exist as a flower from its own side. All of them are merely imputed, merely designated by the mind, by the concept, by the thoughts, on the basis of certain conditions coming and on the basis of certain functioning of that object. Nothing more than that. Since Does it make sense? Seems to make sense. But the problem is when I see the cup still it makes sense, but still when I see the cup, there is appearance of cup to exist from its own side, not merely imputed. Appearance one thing, but not only appearance, then my perceptions, the way I see, the way I perceive is just exactly the way they appear. Even though there is appearance, if I don't see and perceive same way, at least I will not be deceived the way I'm deceived at the moment so strongly. How is that, you know? How crazy are we? It makes absolutely sense, seems correct, but still in our everyday experience. In our everyday experience, seems to be the opposite. Even right now, every day we don't think even about like that. You know, we don't even think, contemplate that way. Here, at least we are contemplating, thinking, and oh, absolutely, it makes sense. Still, there's an appearance of that and perceiving, seeing that way. Because the imprint is so strong, so strong, so strong. The imprint is so strong. You know? So that is why it's not enough to meditate on emptiness 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. To change, to have a total different perspective, opposite way of looking at things. It's not like, you know, you started to think, meditate sometime and then suddenly, you know, everything changed. Of course, we all wish that is the case, you know. So to change your mental habit of seeing, perceiving things a certain way, it requires, you know, a lot of effort to change. Effort and time, you know. Sometimes even very simple habit that we have developed in our life, physical habits that we want to change. Maybe a habit that you have learned in last 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, and now you see that habit is not so nice and you want to change it. It requires a lot of effort, isn't it? And we are talking about is a physical habit, and that we have learned in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Here we're talking about mental habit, not just 1 year, 2 years, not just one lifetime, countless lifetime. You know, that's why, you know, here it makes absolutely sense that it does not exist from its own side with all this reasoning, logics, all this analysis. But then immediately that while we are talking, we are still perceiving to it exist from its own side. It's totally kind of contradictions, you know, feel like contradictions. And so that is, so we have to change, you know, the way we perceive the objects, the way we see the objects. And to change the way we perceive the object, the way we change, then we have to keep on reminding, meditating, contemplating on emptiness again and again all the time. Yeah, so maybe at the moment, maybe we'll kind of have a break. Okay.
Just pass.
This way, yes.
Easy work.
Okay, folks, it's just a short 15-minute break, so good time to stretch and walk around.
Like it's, yeah.
5.
So questions, any questions? So now is the kind of the open for the questions, or any questions, any comments, anything to share, discuss, please. Yes.
I have one question about, of the 51 factors, discrimination and feeling, the two main factors, are they possibly related at all to the realization of emptiness and the cultivation of bodhicitta? Do they seem to be connected, discrimination and feeling? Is there any use that they have or relevance to those two parts?
Well, I haven't seen any kind of explanation from that point of view, but now you have put it, it's possible, because love, compassion, bodhicitta is a feeling, emotions, and and how we feel about another beings is how we perceive them, and the way we perceive them also has effect on the way our mind distinguish. If my mind see their suffering as a suffering and distinguish and as suffering, then I will understand and feel that suffering more, and there's more opportunity to feel love and compassion. If even they are suffering in my consciousness, doesn't kind of distinguish and see, oh, it's not a suffering, doesn't distinguish as a suffering, I might not relate as a suffering, I might not feel as their suffering. Therefore, then without feeling their suffering, I might not feel the compassion to them. So then, again, it can be both in positive way and negative way as well, negative in the sense that how it lead us into samsara cyclic existence continuously, and in a positive way also it can, as you put, maybe it could also help us to feel love and compassion, and through that love and compassion to feel the bodhicitta as well.
And I thought that the discrimination was, for me, relevant to being able to see the essential, distinguish the essential emptiness or non-abiding quality of an object. So you discriminate in mind used properly.
Yes, definitely. Even though, as I mentioned, it is explained from point of view of how we circle in samsara, but as you bring up the caution, we can also, if we look from the other side, then also it can play a positive role in cultivating the spiritual realizations, the feeling discriminating both of them. Okay, I'm coming. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yes, please.
Did Nagarjuna teach mind only as well as Madhyamika?
No, Nagarjuna is holder of the middle way school. Asanga is the profounder of the minor way schools, and so yeah.
And you were talking about the internal object and the external object. So the mind only believes in the internal object.
Yeah. In minor way schools, everything is projection of your mind. Everything's projection of your mind. There's no external things. Even though to us it feels like so, the cup so concrete and so solid, and external objects, they're solid and concrete, but at their point of view, this is also projection of our mind. Everything is projection of our mind. Nagarjuna point of view is slightly different. There is external objects, internal objects, but both external objects and internal objects are merely imputed by the mind, and that is very different from the way the mind school thoughts say, where there is everything projected by mind, therefore there is no external objects. Yes. Yes, please.
When you talked about a mind, seeing an image in your mind, like a cup, in comparison to the actual cup that has parts and function. The one that has the parts and function, is that what we call conventional?
Yes. That is the actual conventional cup. The mind, the image in my mind is not the actual conventional cup. Because it doesn't have the functioning of the conventional cup should functions. It doesn't have that function. So yeah. Yes, and then
I just have 2 people online.
Okay.
I'll just ask the first person to unmute. Okay, so if you could go ahead. Can you?
Okay.
Yeah.
So which Nagarjuna text were you referring to earlier when you were giving his elegant argument about imputing?
Imputing
which text?
Self-consciousness, when you're talking about rebirth. The different schools.
Imputing how everything is merely imputed, you mean?
Yeah. Which Nagarjuna text was that?
Oh, he mentioned in many of his texts, most of his writing are negating how things do not exist inherently or truly or from objectively. Most of his writing are that kind of negating, understanding the true nature of phenomena from negative point of view. But in many of his writings, they are like mainly kind of his 6 fundamental texts writing. Of course, there are many more than 6, but more. Then there are statements from point to point sometimes where he talk about how things are merely imputed, but doesn't go details. Doesn't go much more details. That is the same in Sutra. If you read the Prasnaparamita Sutra, all the Prasnaparamita Sutras, because this is the one of the most shortest Prasnaparamita Sutra, they are much more longer version Prasnaparamita Sutra. If you read them, all again, similarly, Nagarjuna is more of negations. But here and there you will find statements how everything exists by merely imputed, merely designated, without so much details like that you find detail in terms of negations. And I'm going to touch on that tomorrow, why,
Okay.
if you see, that most time, whether you read Heart Sutra or any of the Prasnaparana Sutra or most of the writing of Nagarjunas, they emphasize how things do not exist in order to understand the reality of the phenomena, instead of emphasizing how they exist. Do you get it? Instead of emphasizing how they exist to understand the nature of that phenomena, the reality of that phenomena, they emphasize on how do they not exist from more negation point of view. And there is a really, big reason to do that in terms of our grasping and clinging, in terms of our extreme views, So definitely, I will kind of touch on that more tomorrow, a little bit more of that, because, yeah.
Well,
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
I just had one more question. So is all experience empty, or is experience empty only of the factors that generate samsara?
Again, we shouldn't hold on the word itself empty. Experience, there is experience. There is experience on conventional level. We don't reject the conventional reality. What is being explained is that there is no experience that exists from its own side or objective. But there is an experience due to many cause and conditions, many factors coming together on the basis of many cause, condition, factor coming together. There is sudden functioning of that, sudden experience, pleasant experience, sudden pleasant, unpleasant experience, sudden experience in neutral, neither pleasant, unpleasant. There's those functioning, that effect that cannot be rejected. But even all those experiences are merely imputed on the basis of certain cause, condition, factor coming together. So there is no experience, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, or any kind of experience that exists as that existing from its own side objectively without being merely labeled as an experience on the basis of those conditions or factors coming together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and can I ask the
Yes,
same
please.
person? So Sid, if you could ask your question.
Hi, Geshe. Geshe, you mentioned that only the Buddha can be in Aya equipoise and and also help conceptually all sentient beings. I was just wondering, what's the difference between the Buddha's Aya equipoise and an Arhat's Aya equipoise? I understand the Buddha can do two things, other two things at once, but in terms of just the Aya equipoise, what's the difference between a Buddha and an Arhat?
Buddhas, when they meditate in equipoise on emptiness, for example, deep concentration or equipoise in, they meditate on equipoise or deep meditation or concentration on that emptiness from never arising from that equipoise, always in that equipoise. Whereas arhat, they cannot do that. They have to be in deep meditation and they have to arise from that in order to function and do other things.
But in terms of the realization itself, is there any difference between having to stop and not stop?
Yeah. There is a difference. Buddha's mind, exalted wisdom, Dhammakaya mind, is free of all the obscuration, not only the obscuration, effective obscuration, but subtle obscurations, or sometimes we call obscuration knowledge, sometimes they translate cognitive obscuration, but whatever, there is another subtle obscurations. And Buddha's realization mind is free from that. Arhat is not free from that. That is why they are not still Buddha, because they still have that, even though they don't have delusional obscurations, but they still have that subtle obscuration. And the subtle obscuration is the imprint, not the delusion itself, but there is the imprint left by the delusions.
Oh.
It is like, you have garlic and the scent from the garlic, even though there's no more garlic, but the smell of the garlic is still there in the cup, or whatever. Similarly, there's no more delusion, but still imprint is there. And because that imprints, so even arhat, there is the appearance of truly existence objects, but there's no grasping to that because they have realization. So they have their still appearance. In terms of appearance, they still have the appearance, but they don't have the grasping to that because they understood. So they don't believe and deceived by the appearance, but still there is the appearance, and it's because of that imprint. And for the Buddha, there is not even appearance of object exists from inherently or truly existing from his own side.
Okay, and at the time of death, how do you ensure that you remember to stay in Aya equipoise?
Maybe I need the instruction myself. So maybe you can help me. It's a familiarity. If you keep on doing that practice meditation all the time, even your mind is weak, or even you don't have a strong concentrations or strong mind, still you can do that practice meditation easily and without much effort, because it's something that you have been doing so much, so accustomed, so natural. Your mind go in that natural state of that. It goes that way. You don't even have the full effort. It's just, and so, that is why, familiarity with that, whatever practice that you try to do, if you continue to do that practice again and again, all the time, and slowly your mind gets so, so used to it, even you without any intention to think that way, your mind going thinking that way, in that state. And so if we can develop such practice, then definitely even at the time of death, you will be able to, even when your mind is not so strong, your body is not strong, even you might be very weak, even maybe sometimes you might be kind of, even with some medicine, even your mind is kind of seems like confused a little bit, still you might be able to go in that state because of that very natural. It has been also natural, your mind to go in that state.
Okay.
Thank you.
What?
Did I see? Yes, please.
I'm trying to understand why do things function in the way that they do. Like a cup, there's nothing about the parts which is cupness, but still we can pour water in there as a cup. So why would those certain not cup parts function like that? But this parts of this book doesn't function that way.
Mm-hmm. Because of cause and condition factors. Because it's the way it is made. One, the material itself, the way it is created and made to hold something. Instead, if there's no base, it will not be able to hold it. So the way it is made, the material that it is made, and so all these cause condition factors, different cause and condition factors, make it something to function different than another object. Another object has different functioning because the different matter from it is made of, the way it is made, for different purpose that it is made, for all this, and how it is made, depending on all these factors. So then different objects, depending on different factors, different cause and conditions, it can function differently, one object from another object. Whether it is human made or is naturally, certain objects that you find in the world that is, formed naturally, not human made, but still because of different cause and conditions, they have different functions. Different cause conditions, different factors make them to function differently. Yeah. Yes, please.
We cannot sleep in the middle of the night, we wake up and just cannot sleep. What's the simplest way to meditate, on emptiness?
Oh, most simplest way to meditate. First, we need to have some understanding of emptiness as it is explained in the Sutra that we have been discussing. Using some kind of analytical meditations to understand the nature of that objects. You need to have some understanding, some practice that done in our practice. On the basis of that practice, then in tantric practice, there is a kind of for example, yourself. Visualize yourself dissolve into light. The light dissolves into becoming smaller and smaller, and then can dissolve into emptiness. And then trying to experience that trying to be in that state of that emptiness. Maybe that might be one of the easy way of doing it. Sometimes we have a strong grasping about ourselves, of concrete and solid and real I, the real I who is unable to sleep, the real I who is having all whatever that's going in our mind, thoughts, that's making us difficult to sleep. Or maybe there's maybe because there's certain other conditions, maybe food, maybe due to certain change in the weather, maybe due to change in other hormone or whatever different things that is affecting us. But still, whatever is affecting us, the cause can be different for different people. It might not be same for every person who might not be able to sleep. It can be different cause, different reasons for, sometimes it could be our body, sometimes it can be something other external factors outside our body, sometimes it can be our mind, sometimes it can be a combination of all. But still there is strong sense of I, and so we need to kind of destroy that sense of I. And so with that, some understanding according to the Sutra point of view at the same time, so first you have that strong visualization of yourself, which you feel very strong, very strong, concrete real. And then, you can think that strong, concrete self that is unable to sleep, or that is experiencing whatever experiencing, and that makes us unable to sleep. That self, concrete self, dissolve into the light, not so concrete and not so solid. Dissolve into the light, you visualize, imagine. And even that light, then shrink from top and down, becoming smaller, small, and then dissolve into emptiness, completely empty. And so then you can stay in that empty. So there is no self that is having difficult sleeping anymore. It's totally empty. So that might be one way of maybe trying to apply and see. Okay. Yes, please.
With the idea of it making things easier, is there one? I mean, you've mentioned a lot of different texts. Is there one that you think is a good starting point for studying emptiness?
I'm so bad at recommending English books because I don't read hardly any English book, so then I don't have so much access to that. But I do know there is one His Holiness book, I think what is called Seeing Yourself as Yourself or something. What is it?
Yeah, seeing yourself as you really are.
Oh yeah, seeing yourself as you really are. I think that might be helpful. That is good. I think there is one by Geshe I don't know what is the title of that. And I think I have.
Lama's Geshe, How Things Exist.
Okay, I think I haven't read that fully of that. I think I did read some, and so yeah, maybe this might be some of the text that you might want to start with before going into more classical Nagarjuna's writings. If you have some basis already, and then if you go on Nagarjuna's and others' writing, then it can help you to even more deeper. Sometimes it can open to understand more deeper. But sometimes if you don't have the basic, then you can be lost. You can be totally lost what he's trying to say, what he's trying to, and that is why there's a lot of, in the old time, also in modern scholars, a lot of modern scholars, have misunderstood Nagarjuna's, and they thought he was nihilism, But in the earliest, I think in earliest scholars, modern scholars in 20s, 30s, 40s, when they don't have so much access to so many commentaries, Then they were reading Nagarjuna's books and they thought he is nihilism. This guy is nihilism because they didn't understood correctly, you know. And so, and now because there are a lot of commentaries, people have the less misunderstanding of that, you know, because there is explanation of those more clearly now due to many available of many other commentaries. So yeah. Okay.
And when you were talking before about the body and the parts, and you were sort of taking it further and further down, almost like just, I guess, like at a molecular level. Do you think that sorry, I'm just trying to get my thoughts here. So something occurs to me like that sort of impermanence of things. So do you think that sort of studying, or do you think impermanence is directly related, like to emptiness, and the two useful to sort of, I don't know, combine them or think about them both at the same time, or?
Definitely understanding of impermanence helps to understand emptiness to certain, it leads closer to understanding emptiness, you know, to understand how things do not exist inherently. You know, if things exist inherently, then they will be static, permanent, you know, it is how it is inherently that way, and it will always be inherent that way. There is no possibility of change, you know. So through understanding impermanent, we understand, you know, that things change. Things are changing due to changing cause, conditions, factors, things are changing. Through understanding of the change and impermanent nature, then you begin to see it can't be inherently existing if things changes. You know, it can't be static. You know, it can't be, and so through that it does help. It's kind of opening, or it is kind of opening door to the understanding of emptiness. It does help in that way. But just that understanding itself will not have. You need to go beyond that. It is a tools and help that can help us to lead closer to understanding of emptiness. It can support us to understand the emptiness. But just that understanding itself, just by itself, cannot have the realization of emptiness. But definitely it does help. Definitely, to looking from that point of view. Yeah. Yes, please.
Are there particular meditations or techniques for realizing the emptiness of the aggregates for each one, or how do you recommend tackling it?
In same with each of them, as I mentioned when I spoke about the aggregate of the, you know, form, here mainly referring to your own form, that is your body. And just as we did for the eye, you do the same, you know. First, trying to see how does your body, your form body, appear to your mind, how you perceive your form body. Is there the appearance of your body, your form body, to exist from its own side objectively? And do you perceive that way? You know, so that's one thing. And then, you know, second is, does it really exist the way it appears to our mind, the way we perceive to exist? If it does exist the way it appears, the way we mind perceive to exist, that means existing from objectively from its own side, then, you know, then you should be able to find, when you do same analysis like the self within the aggregate, when you do the same analysis of the body, form body, within the objects, that is the part of that body, you know. Can that body be found in the part of the bodies, which are the limbs and the part of those limbs, organ and so forth, or can it be found outside of that? And when you do same analysis, then it's same like the the way we did with the self. So then it comes to the same conclusion that you cannot find either within each of those parts or limbs and the part of the limbs, neither outside of that. And therefore, the body, the form body cannot exist, from its own side, obviously from its own side. So therefore, form body is also merely imputed or labeled on the basis of those parts coming together and having certain functions.
So to use the same steps for feeling, for consciousness?
Yes, absolutely. So that is one thing it is in one of the sutra. No, I don't recall the name of the sutra. And also, where it says, once you understand emptiness of one person, one object, then you apply that same to all other objects. And then you use the same reasoning, same logic, same way of meditating, you apply to that. And then once you have realization with one object, then it becomes very easy to have realization of other objects. It's just like, so then it wouldn't be any difficult to have a realization of emptiness of all phenomena, all objects. Once you have realization with relation to one object, because then it's just not only the self, also the aggregate and all other objects. So then it's the same analysis you do. So the challenging is to have one realization related to one object. Once you have that, then it's easy. Then we don't have to feel, there's endless phenomena. Therefore, it feels like that you have to meditate endlessly like that way. Yes.
If I understand correctly, you're saying it is easier, but you still must do it. As in.
Yes, at the very beginning, and then once you do it, you don't have to go in so details. Just moment you go in, you can just understand and feel that way. It is like you can sink into that very easily without having to spend so much time or analyzing so deeply in so details. Yeah. Any others? Yes, please.
So is it just like what we did with the cup, basically?
Yeah. You do it like the cup with the body, like the person. They all are same exercise, same meditation, same analytical meditations. Of course, this is the not only way of analyzing. There are many different reasoning, logic, there are many different analyses. This is just one example of how to do it. And for certain people, a particular method, particular reasoning logic, they might find more effective than others. So basically, you try to study and learn different reasoning, different logic, different method, and then see which one is more effective to you, which one suits you, your mind more, and then whatever suits your mind, whatever you feel more connected, more powerful, you try to use that particular method. Yeah. Yes, that will be the last questions. Yeah.
You mentioned the challenge is that one realization of one object. So it would mean that you need to fine-tune your focus. It's like something simple like shamatha. Before.
No, here the answer that I was saying is, if either you have a realization the emptiness of self or emptiness of phenomena, so phenomena could be your aggregate, of your physical aggregate, or your feeling, discrimination, compositional factor of consciousness, any of those, or whatever object. Once you have unmistaken realization on depending on any of those objects, once you have that, then then it is easy to have the realization and emptiness of other objects, because you just apply the same kind of reasoning, same logic, same meditations, and so then it becomes very easy. So that was the portions, that was the answer that I was trying to say. It would be easy to do that if we have realization of emptiness in relation to one object. You know, one object. It could be the person or it could be the phenomenon. And within the phenomena, there are many different phenomena. Normally, it is explained. It's more easy at the very beginning when you're trying to meditate on the selfness. It is more easier to meditate on the selfness of the person first, and then expand that to the phenomena such as aggregate. You know, but again, that is the general kind of the advice, the suggestions, and also that is how it's presented in many of the teachings. When they present the emptiness, they start with presenting the emptiness of the person, and then presenting the emptiness of the phenomena, and then within the phenomena presenting the emptiness of conditioned phenomena, and then non-conditioned phenomena, you know, and then within that, then presenting the emptiness of emptiness. So that is how gradually that kind is how it is presented. And not only this, that is how it is presented also in meditation. If we follow that sequences, it's better to have better results in most cases. Yeah. Okay. So we do the dedications.
Page 8. Turn the page for long life prayers, starting with His Holiness Dalai Lama. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those who be supreme, makes clear in the light of the well spoken unto us the sacred game of tradition, essence of Buddhist teachings. Foremost and Holy Lama, to you who are supreme, we make this prayer of supplication, O Lama, please, please.
So thank you very much, everyone. And I think there's a lot of information to digest.
Yes.
So maybe we can start it to digest slowly, maybe at home. And yeah, and then see you tomorrow. And if you have more questions, please bring it tomorrow. And probably maybe it might answer some more questions you might haven't asked now today, tomorrow as we discuss. or it might lead to more cautions. In that case, you can bring up tomorrow. Okay, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Geshe.
Okay, have a good evening. Thank you. Thank you.
So just a reminder, if folks have marbles or objects that you wish to, like that, appropriate for your objects to be blessed, practice objects, bring those, if you wish to, bring those along tomorrow. So that will be after lunch, when Geshe's back after lunch tomorrow. Yeah, and so we have meditation from 10 to 10:45, and then Geshe joins us at 11, and then the rest of the schedule is sort of like today. Is like today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.